But I think the season that the Lord has me in is it's not about me. Like it's about how I can step out and help and serve other people. And so it's really been a mindset shift of like, you know what? I am here where I'm here today. I don't need to go off and do something necessarily for myself, but how can I serve others really carefully and really intentionally and just do what God's been calling me to do and be really obedient to this season.
Welcome to Follower of One, where faith meets real work. We're a global community helping others move one notch closer to Jesus. Wherever you are, that's your mission field. You are a missionary. Welcome back to this episode of the Follower of One podcast. Very excited to have a conversation with Nicole Haines today. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been a roller coaster to actually find a time for us to connect, to have this conversation. We actually, for those listening, we had scheduled it for last week. Nicole had better things to do, like not have a voice last week. But we are very much excited to have this conversation and just explore what does it look like to have your faith an integral part in your everyday life. And so I'm very encouraged to have a conversation with Nicole, not only from an entrepreneurial perspective, but Nicole, you're VP of operations at a really cool company. So I would love to, first and foremost, jump into a little bit about who you are. Nicole is the director of operations for Original Form, which is a boutique creative and marketing agency based in San Diego, California, whereas she is responsible for the operational excellence of the business. And Nicole, when I met you, you were actually living in Denver, Colorado. So you've got a great mountain view, I'm sure. So talk a little bit about the origin story, no pun intended, for Original Form, the company that you work for.
Yeah, absolutely. So Original Form, like you just mentioned, is a boutique creative and marketing studio. We do everything from strategy to design to branding, all the way to paid social and advertising. So we like to take brands from nothing to something, or whether they are actually doing something, but maybe want to reestablish and re-evolve themselves as a brand and kind of give themselves a new identity as the trends in our industry change. We kind of meet them where they're at and then essentially provide them with solutions over services. So that's something that we really pride ourselves on is not just being an agency that provides services to people, but actually finding the right solution for them in their particular point in their business journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is certainly a lot of things, but it's very cool. I mean, from an operational perspective, me personally, I love the 20 to 30,000 foot view, but I also love getting into the details as well, much like what we do on this podcast, which is get into the details about faith in the marketplace. So, Nicole, what was the story behind your career now? How long have you been with Original Form?
Yeah, so I've been with Original Form for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, but the story of kind of how it came to be is the founders of Original Form I've known for about 10 years. So we met when I was living back in San Diego. Myself and the other founder, Veronica Cordero, we actually worked at our first agency together in San Diego. So I was just getting my career going. I was a project manager. She was actually a designer. And we met and connected. We've been friends this entire time. And then her and her partner, Bijan, actually started this agency in 2018. And so they kind of started as a side hustle. And then as my career evolved and I kind of worked into project management, into operations, there kind of came an opportunity to step into building their agency, which is they were two employees when I started, and now we're kind of growing and expanding. We've got about 10 employees, and hopefully we're ending the year at 15. So it's growing at a rapid rate, which is really exciting. But it's just been awesome to be able to be a part of an agency that we just create really intentional and great work for our clients, but also it's nice to be able to work with people that you've known for a really long time and you can call family. So that's what I really enjoy about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've always been in the mantra of it's great to do good business with good people. And especially whenever in this day and age, it's very easy to be in business with people that are not so great, but whenever you can work with your friends who you can call family, that just is really the icing on the cake. And so, love the story that you've been able to post now. But even in looking at the website, it's whenever you can say I've worked with Adidas or companies like that, it's a very cool thing. I remember whenever we first met, it was through our foundation series at Faith Driven Entrepreneur, and you started talking about some of the work that you were doing. And whenever you start working with $25,000 watches and above in terms of branding and opportunity, I was like, Nicole knows what she's talking about. That's some good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really fun to work with brands that are very well known, but it's also really fun to work with the brands that are not very well known. Like we've been working with a couple that haven't even really launched their website or launched what their product is going to be out in the world. And so it is kind of cool to work on the different spectrum of businesses that we work with, which is really fun. There's a nice balance.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to your work, obviously we could do a deep dive on your day-to-day and operations, but from a faith forward perspective, what would you say your faith journey is like? What are just a couple of milestones that you can look back on and say, man, that was God moving, that was a God wink, and move that into where you are today as director of operations and incorporating your faith into your day to day there?
Yeah, I think personally, truthfully, I don't know how I ended up in this field. Like 10 years ago, I was working for Pepsi actually as a sales associate, and I decided out of nowhere, because I'd been in the consumer packaged goods industry for a while out of college, and I just decided like, you know what? I want to take a shift. And so I ended up landing a job at an agency in San Diego working at the front desk. So took a massive pay cut and kind of just jumped into a new industry that I had no idea about. And then since then have been in that industry for going on 11 years now. So it kind of just landed me into this position where I worked at the front desk, understood what an agency was all about, and then it slowly evolved into project management, executive production, group directing, and now kind of overseeing the operations of an agency. And so I guess in terms of like my faith journey, truthfully, I hadn't been following the Lord the first part of my career. So I was following the Lord about 4 years ago, and that's when I feel like everything kind of started to shift in terms of how I lead and how I approach work. And so prior to that, I would say I was very like performance driven in terms of the agency world can be very fast and it can be very demanding. And if you don't really take a moment to step back and look at the bigger picture of what you're doing on the day to day, you can get really easily sucked into checking tasks off your list or just working until 8 p.m. And a lot of that stuff just really was something that was kind of ingrained in me in my early career. And then after finding the Lord, I started to really kind of peel out and be like, how can I actually show up in a way that impacts the people around me instead of actually doing really good work? And so I'm a really big proponent on not just doing great work, but actually being the person who kind of fosters an environment to do great work. And that mindset shift is really what I feel I've taken into being a director of operations, because you're kind of sitting at a different level than just being on a project level. You are overseeing operations, you're overseeing people, you're overseeing profit of the business. And so, yes, you can get really lost in the weeds of those things, but I think the Lord's really helped me to identify who can I become in this situation? How can I actually show up in a different way instead of opening my calendar and seeing back-to-back meetings from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. and then being like, did I even make an impact today?
Yeah.
So it's just like about being present, showing up. And I think the Lord has really helped me realize that it's okay to take a breath in your day and become who you need to be instead of constantly do.
Man, there is so much truth to what you just said. And I think that we could deep dive in a lot of different directions. But one thing that I would just like to circle back on briefly, not to get too far into the history, but you said that you started following the Lord about 4 years ago. And I feel that that's certainly something that a lot of people come to the realization, especially after college, leaving home for the first time. There's a lot there. And I would just say, from your standpoint, personally, did you grow up in a Christian household? Was that part of your story? And then you came back? Or is it like, hey, I met Jesus after college, which either way, it's totally great. I just kind of wanted to hone in on that one quick question.
Yeah, so I actually grew up Catholic when my parents were still together. I did grow up in the church, but when my parents divorced, I kind of lost touch with everything. So didn't really have faith. I lived with my mom. I don't think I stepped foot in a church for probably 15 years after that moment. And so this is kind of a part of my testimony, but the Lord really met me in 2020 when COVID happened. And I just felt this desire to kind of reach out to my dad. I hadn't really had a great relationship with him, and I reached out to him for the first time in a really long time, and we reconnected. And he was actually the one that re-sparked my faith. He had kind of given me this I remember we were having a conversation one day and he was just like, I feel like you've lost touch with the Lord. And I was like, yeah, Dad, like I have not been in a church for a really long time. Long story short, my dad ended up passing away 2 years after that moment. And then him and I were both saved and baptized in the hospital. And so that was really my shift in my life. It was obviously a big like wake up moment for me of like, oh, I just lost a parent, but also through it, God was so redemptive in what happened. Like he not only reconciled our relationship, but also just gave me a new perspective on life that I wasn't carrying prior to that moment. So no, I wasn't following the Lord the first part of my life, but I can say that life has not looked the same since then, which has been amazing.
Yeah, what a great testimony of redemption, Nicole. I really appreciate you sharing that. And it's one of the things that we oftentimes, I talk about it a lot. My standpoint, I grew up in a Christian conservative household. Notably, I was from Texas, so I think that that's just a gimme to go to church on Sunday mornings. But it's interesting because I think that even so, I often think of myself as the older son in the story of the prodigal son because I didn't go out. Of course, life happens, right? I'm not trying to pretend that I was perfect, but I do think that we all have ways and seasons that as we do press into this idea that God loves us for who we are and he's going to leave the 99 to go find the one.
Okay.
And knowing that it's a beautiful story of redemption, it's just an opportunity for us to not so much lay our guards down, but to know that we all have just a unique way that the Lord speaks to us through people, through circumstances. And that would be just something that I would highlight for your story. And that you and your dad in the hospital were baptized and saved together. Like, that's just the icing
Yeah.
on the cake. That's just like one of those heartwarming moments of like, man, that's a really cool thing.
And he's so gracious too with like his timing. Like it was on Easter of 2022 and like you can't make up stories like that in
Yeah.
terms of just how he meets you and yeah, he's just so kind.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that we could continue to talk there. And one thing that we were talking in preparation for the podcast, you had said, and I asked the question, when did faith and work first collide for you? And you said that, to paraphrase, you realize that work isn't something I need to really achieve or accomplish, but it's a steady process of becoming who God called me to be every single day. And from somebody that's probably very similar to you in the sense of I'm a very competitive person. And I think that we can oftentimes, especially if we're operationally minded, we love the details, but we also love the 20 to 30,000 foot view. It can be very easy to fall into this idea of we're always striving for excellence and the perfection mindset. And so I love what you said there. I would love for you to then just unpack that. What
Yeah.
transpired a year ago and how does that look into your everyday now?
Yeah, well, I think the Lord is constantly working on us, whether it's in our personal lives or whether it's in work. That's something that I've really realized over the last couple of years in walking with him is like, it's not just this, hey, I have something, to maybe improve upon, and then like, oh, it's done. Like he's constantly refining us every step of the journey. And I was talking to someone about this the other day, but in Genesis, we really look at in the first chapter, God created work and it was good. And that happened before the fall. But a lot of people, I think, look at work today, especially in like I don't want to say in a secular worldview, but there is a lot of noise out there that if you're not doing something for yourself and you're not passionate about it, then like just leave what you're doing because like you have to do what you're passionate about. And I just think the world has kind of taken this idea of work and given it a bad rep. Like, oh, if you're not happy in your job or you're not enjoying what you're doing, then it's a bad thing and you have to go find something else in order to feel that satisfaction. And that was me for a very long time. Like, even in this industry that I've been in, I've had the same question of like, is this really truly what I want to be doing? Is this truly fulfilling my like quote unquote life's purpose? And the Lord has slowly started to just reveal to me over time that it's not necessarily about what I do. Like the actual work that I do on the day to day is not as important as showing up and being in my purpose and being who He's called me to be. And so I think that has really been the mindset shift for me is understanding okay, I don't really need to find like the perfect job or the perfect role or the perfect paper, perfect paper, whatever role. But I just think it's really about who he's called me to be. And so I've really put the focus on what is my purpose and how can my purpose actually extend into any situation or any setting that he provides. Because I think over time, the opportunities that he's going to give you are going to change, but who you are is not going to change. And it's like really about finding your identity in him, but also understanding that he gives each and every one of us a unique skill, a unique talent to be able to execute that in a setting that he has called us to be in. And so I truthfully believe that he has called me to be in an operational setting because I have a very analytical side to me that I can't really shake. And there's a lot of times where I'm like, oh, I just wish I wasn't like this. Like, I wish I wasn't so put together, like have everything super structured and super documented. But he's actually shown me that it's a gift. It just needs to be exercised and balanced in a way that is equal because you have to work with so many different personalities, so many different perspectives on the day to day. And if you're very single-minded in just doing something and doing it the way that you think is right, that doesn't really leave space or open up the ability to allow different perspectives in work. And so it's really about coming back to what's my purpose? And I truthfully believe that my purpose is empowering potential in others and empowering that potential in organizations and empowering that potential in businesses. And so I feel like the Lord has really called me here at this point in my life. And if I can do that every day, then it doesn't really matter the output of what I do, as long as I'm empowering people to take that next step.
Well, I think we can just stop everything now. You just completely mic dropped the entire flow. So, 100%. I think it's fantastic. And just truthfully, everything you said, I love that. As you were talking, I started thinking about one thing that I really appreciate is that you were talking about purpose, but one of the key things just to double down on is this idea that you have to find who you are first. You have to find your identity because if you don't, I like to say you can stumble into purpose and you can stumble into something that you really enjoy doing and you have that drive and that call and that opportunity to really step in. But at the end of the day, when that season ends, you have to go find something else. And so in the framing of the conversation about purpose, I always like to reiterate about identity. You have to know who you are. And there's so many people and individuals, and it's no fault, it's just the reality. I think that we're so pressurized to go and do and be that we're not actually just who are we? We don't,
Yeah.
it's very difficult to sit in a posture of revelation for ourselves. I think that as a person that's driven, it's very hard. Hey, I need to go and do this, or I need to do that. I need to stay busy and occupied. It's very, at least for me, it's very easy to sit still and say, oh, let me open the Bible and let me just journal. How does this actually play out? Like, who am I?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's a process too. Like I don't know. I think I've sat in sermons before and one time a pastor said like if someone doesn't look at you and look at the fruit of your life and say there's something different about you. If they don't say that, then I think we're not maybe walking in the way that God has called us to be because I do think there is a and I don't say this in like a prideful way, but I do think there is a different way in which we show up, especially people who believe in faith and in the workplace where we don't get really swayed as easily as maybe other people would in the world because we know who we are and like where we stand firm in. And so I think that gives us like a lot of purpose and confidence and strength. And I think that's kind of a differentiating factor for just leaders who are leading with faith and being able to like carry some of that weight that comes along with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one thing to really position yourself like that, but it's another way to really press into that. And that's honestly why we're having this conversation today, because we spend I think the stats are pretty high up there. I mean, 80% of our life is spent in the marketplace, and only a very small percentage is actually spent, number one, at home, but number two, in the church building. And so that's really why we have conversations like this to encourage people wherever you are, whatever role you're in, how can you move the needle to get one notch closer to Jesus? And one of the good friends of the follower of one ministry, he and Mike and I have been talking, and he told Mike, he was like, hey, at the end of the day, just don't suck.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't suck, people are going to notice. You're going to
Yeah.
just do better than your counterparts, or you're going to be better than who you were yesterday because you're in the mindset of not to suck and to be a better person.
Yeah, I know. It seems so simple, but it's like just be a kind person. If you can be a kind person, like it goes a long way.
It does. It does. I think there's a Bible verse that says, love God and love people. I totally paraphrase that. But at the end of the day, that's all you got to do is show a little bit of love to people. And it
Yeah.
doesn't cost you anything to smile. And don't be that awkward person on the sidewalk that just like cheeses whenever you come into contact with people. But it's just this idea of simplifying how can we execute our faith well in our day-to-day walk. And we've talked a lot about, identity and purpose. And I would just also echo this, Nicole, as we're talking, but whenever you're, growing up, my parents would always say, you're going to be the sum of the five people that you hang out with. And so, for those that are listening, for me included, preaching to the choir here, but it's just this realization of take ownership of the things that you're putting into your mind, because that's going to naturally pour out in some capacity of who are you hanging out with? How are you spending your time? And it also reframes the question and the statement that we made a minute ago. It's like be intentional about getting in the quiet time, stop doom scrolling for at least 5 minutes a day, and instead just like sit in the silence of, hey, what am I doing? How was my day? Do you ever spend time doing that?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I personally start my morning every morning like in the Word, in my Bible, and I feel like that really centers me because it's amazing how quickly you can get off track just by like missing that morning time or missing that silence with him. And it's like, we oftentimes think that oh, it's okay. I'll go like a week or 2 weeks. Like the Lord's always there. The Lord's always with me. But we don't realize how much it actually refreshes our spirit and how much we need it until we actually sit in his presence. And that's something that I've also been, I feel like, pretty disciplined with as well, because you can go like 2 or 3 days without spending time with him. And then the next thing you know, you're off on another tangent or off on another path. And it's like you have to come back to what was the last thing the Lord told me to do? What was the last thing that He asked me to be obedient to? Because our flesh wants to so easily just do all of the things or reach for all of the things. And it's just really important. I think about like eating. I use it as in the same context, but it's like we have to eat every morning when we wake up. Like we constantly have to eat. We can't forget to eat a meal. And it's kind of the same thing. Like when we're eating the word spiritually and we're feeding on the word spiritually every day, that nourishes our spirit and our soul too. And I think if we can prioritize that and surround ourselves, like you were mentioning, with people in our close circle that can also uplift us and encourage us, then we kind of constantly stay in that funnel. And I think that that's really important too, especially if you're working in a corporate setting or a large organization where you can kind of get easily distracted. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've touched on a couple of things. One, quiet time, but number two, eating healthy. And
Yeah.
I will say that from a standpoint of eating healthy, the Bible talks about rest and it talks about taking care of your body and being intentional about that. And even just yesterday, I believe maybe day before yesterday, focusing on, it was an article focusing on the importance of fasting
Mm.
and the really great health benefits of fasting for 36 hours. And I think too, we were intentional about fasting as the new year kicked off with faith driven movements of 21-day prayer and fasting. I think it's just a reframing of how do you execute your life, what is important to you, and just taking the time to unravel that and not to just like completely be deep all the time. But I do think that there's a lot of truth to that because if you take care of your mind, body, and spirit, that spirituality component to it is going to be replenished and it's going to be pressed in and not shaken. I think that's a Bible verse too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. Yeah. Fasting, I would say, is something that I definitely can get better at in terms of just taking that moment to pause and not have any distraction, not have anything in my way, and also use it as a way to really get clear on some big decisions that you're making, not just in your personal life, but also in business. And that's something that, if we're also going to kind of talk about ways in which I'm able to kind of take my faith into work, it is really about praying for specific outcomes in the business or praying for certain things that maybe I don't have the answers for, but maybe God does, and really leaning on Him for those answers, leaning on Him to provide and guide and lead instead of me having to do it in my own strength all the time. You've just reminded me, Addison, that fasting is one of the ways in which you can do that. And I should probably start to do that a bit more. So thank you for the encouragement.
Yeah, hey, well, we can all do it together.
Yeah.
I think that there's importance of even us talking through, but then our listeners as well. It's like, hey, the most important thing that you can do is to not go through life alone. If and it's not to say that you have to join a bunch of groups or be plugged in, but it is a reframing to know that even in the garden when Adam was created, he God realized that he shouldn't and he couldn't be alone. So then that's when Eve came along. And so there's intentionality all through the Bible of working together, but then also being intentional about doing life together and encouragement, which is what this conversation is supposed to be. It's supposed to be an encouragement of not only Nicole, how you're living out your faith, but also how you can influence people in the marketplace through your faith. And it's not so much that you're sharing scriptures every day, but it's just in how you interact, how you present opportunities. And one of the big things that you said at the beginning of this call was that you're looking to hire more people. And so culture is a huge thing of how you can foster that environment as you bring on more employees and continue building and crafting that culture.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think God also calls us to be the light sometimes in like really dark places. And so sitting in the seat that I'm sitting in my role today, like I am responsible for bringing on new hires. I am responsible for recruiting and interviewing. And, I think there's something to be said about establishing like the values of your organization and what really propels you to be able to find like-minded people. But at the end of the day, like, yes, we have very strong beliefs in what we believe in, but that doesn't mean that we aren't going to accept everyone as children of God. So no matter what you are, no matter like what race, whatever you identify with, like we are called to love others. And I think when we finally put that lens on ourselves and realize that it's not actually our job to change people. It's not our job to convert them to Christianity, let's say, but we can always plant those seeds. And I think that just by being strong in our faith and standing firm in our faith, over time, that seed kind of starts to grow and people become curious. And I have definitely been one in my faith over the last couple of years in previous jobs as well, to not be shy about my faith, to not be the one that holds back in sharing about my beliefs. And I think that is very powerful because you can come to the table and say, this is what I believe. And a lot of people might not agree with you. A lot of people might have completely different beliefs than you. But what's really cool is on the other side of that, you actually get people who are inspired by your faith. I had multiple people come up to me when I've shared my testimony previously at work and just say, hey, like I'm a Christian too. And like you're inspiring me to actually live out my faith even stronger in the workplace. And so I would just encourage, yeah, anybody who's listening to this as well, that if you're scared to share your faith or you're scared to be bold in your faith because not everyone around you believes the same thing, it's okay. Like you don't have to change people's beliefs, but you can just simply be that light in a really dark part of the world.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so encouraging because it's not so much that you have to share your testimony, it's just so much as you have to be willing to show up with who you are. Because even in those dark places, and this is how I like to frame it, in those dark places or even in a work environment, people bring their selves, the people bring themselves to the marketplace anyway. So why not, as a believer, bring yourself to the marketplace and be intentional about finding those opportunities to really just reach out and come alongside somebody, whether that's in the water cooler conversation in the break room or whether that's in passing in a local coffee shop. I think that there are a lot of ways that we can just show up with who we are and be intentional about that. So I love what you said there, Nicole. Would you have anything else to add with that?
No, I think honestly the marketplace is good. And I think that's like maybe my biggest message because it's had to be something that I've had to actually switch my mindset around as well. I have always wanted to like start my own business or start my own course, and I've been very entrepreneurial minded my entire life. But I think the season that the Lord has me in is it's not about me, like it's about how I can step out and help and serve other people. And so it's really been a mindset shift of like, you know what? I am here where I'm here today. I don't need to go off and do something necessarily for myself, but how can I serve others really carefully and really intentionally and just do what God's been calling me to do and be really obedient to this season because you never know when He's going to open up another door. You never know when He's going to put you into a new season. And so it's just about being content and being present with where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of new seasons, you're about to change complete climates with your new season of life. So, very excited about that. Not to jump into the details there, but I do love what you said, Nicole, doubling down on one of the core missions of Follower of One is really to give 5 practical ways for people to come alongside in the marketplace. One of those is to serve others, and you already touched on that. The second one that you had said, hey, this is really important to me, is the power of prayer. I know that we've touched on prayer, but for you specifically, to encourage those that are listening, what would you say that prayer really means to you? How do you incorporate that into your everyday?
Yeah, well, I definitely would say it for me personally, it's happened in three ways. Like one, just praying for myself and that I can be the leader that God has called me to be in the workplace. So that's one. The second is praying for the people that I work with. I think that's really powerful. And I think that that's one of the ways in which God wants to use leaders in the workplace is really praying for those individuals. Like, is there a world in which that individual might come to know God through just your presence and being there? And then the third is actually just praying for the business that you work for itself. Like, pray for its prosperity, pray for the abundance, pray for the new employees or the growth that you're about to experience. Because I think when we step into the marketplace or we step into the job that we're in, it does come with like a specific anointing. It does come with a specific growth that maybe we didn't necessarily realize. And so just praying for the business as well, and also praying that you can praying that other people within the organization would receive maybe the ideas or the innovation that you're bringing to the table because a lot of people may not be ready for the things that you're wanting to bring to the table. And so praying that they can expand their mind or praying that they would open up, be open to the ideas that you're bringing into the business is always really, really important because again, there's truly nothing that you can do in your own strength. It's just through God's power and how he's working in other people's lives to be able to open those doors. So, yeah, I love prayer. It's like the most powerful thing that you can do as a leader.
Yeah, I love that. Just as a believer, but
Yes.
especially as a leader, whenever you have to work top down, bottom up, whenever you're in that type of leadership opportunity. And whenever you were talking, I've been coming back to Proverbs 16:9, which says we can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. And I think that's 100% in direct alignment with our entire conversation today, what we've been really intentional about doing and becoming, not only from a quiet time perspective, but also, just the importance and how you emphasize the power of prayer, not only for yourself, but for other people and the company you'd work for. So I challenge everybody, you can be like Paul, you can pray without ceasing, and that doesn't mean that you always have to cross your arms or get on your knees and close your eyes, but just really that lifeline that we don't often put into perspective how easy it is to talk to God throughout the day. And it's like, hey, God, what's up? Obviously, there's a little bit more flavor to that, but at the end of the day, it's so true. How can we align ourselves with God first and foremost, but then also be in community with one another so that we can go and share life? So, Nicole, thanks for everything that you've shared today. I always like to end with one quick question, and it's this: if you would give a word of encouragement for somebody that's in the marketplace today, what would your encouragement be to empower them to live out their faith in the marketplace as a follower of one?
I was thinking about this when I was getting ready this morning, but the word presence just came up for me, and I know we've been having conversations about this too, sidelining, but I would just encourage people to be present with where they're at. I think in this world today, specifically in the marketplace, specifically in corporate America, everything is accelerating at a speed that we can't keep up with. And with technologies like AI and everything that's coming into the workforce, it is incredibly difficult to keep up with the pace at which things are moving. And I'm kind of going against the grain right now and just really not only instilling in our organization, but also with the people that we're hiring, is just to slow down. Like the pace at which we're working is not sustainable for a very long period of time. And so I think the one of the ways in which we can slow down is really just to become present with what's in front of us today and not to overwork or extend your energy, but really slow down and be present in every meeting. Like turn your notifications off, be present with the people that are in front of you. And that's just my biggest encouragement because when we're known, seen, and loved by others, that's like one of the most important gifts that we can give to individuals. And a lot of us are not getting that. And so I make that a point in my leadership and also encourage the people I work with to just be present with every moment, not to rush and to really slow down. So that's my encouragement.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, Nicole, we've had such a great conversation. Thanks for being on and bringing it all to a close with a nice bow on it, I think we also came up with three P's today: prayer, presence, and pace.
Ooh, that's
And so
good.
I would just say for those listening, if you forget everything else that we talked about today, just remember these three P's:
Mm.
prayer, presence, and pace.
Love that.
And I think that you would have a great opportunity to serve God in the marketplace right where you are. So, Nicole, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I'm sure our listeners will have a lot of great insight to listen to. But from follower of one, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Hi, guys.
As you go, live your faith with intention. Pray, appreciate others, know what you believe, serve others, speak for yourself. These small steps shape a faithful life. Wherever God has placed you, walk it out with courage. You are a missionary.